the Director of Advocacy at the ARC of Northern Virginia, where she oversees our region's grassroots advocacy campaigns for people with developmental disabilities and creates informational resources for people with disabilities and their families. Lucy began volunteering with ARCs in college while studying vulnerable populations. She found her home in the mission of ensuring all human and civil rights for people with disabilities are respected. She has worked in residential settings for people with complex medical needs, as a case manager for individuals with public supports, and as a public guardian focused on empowering individuals to grow their self-advocacy skills. She has worked closely with families whose loved ones are leaving institutions, state and local legislators, and our community at large to share the mission of disability inclusion. Lucy is focusing a lot of efforts on supported decision-making, ensuring people with disabilities have independent and integrated housing, and reforming our justice system to better recognize and meet the needs of the disability community. She loves talking to people with disabilities and helping them share their stories to affect change. As a result of her efforts, she was selected as a 2018 40 Under 40 award by the Leadership Center for Excellence and a 2020 40 Under 40 award by the Washington Business Journal. Lucy is a mom of 3 adorable kids and lives with her family in South Arlington. Lucy, it is so great to have you here. Thank you for being with us and welcome.
Thank you for having me. And as we talked a little bit, I think before the presentation formally started, we recognize that as parents, we always have a lot on our plates, and especially when there's a snow day called for rain in the middle of winter. We get that some folks are watching this with half attention on it, or in loud situations, or even later. So just know that you can always reach out to us, and I'll make sure my contact information is shared. And the information and referral we do where we answer questions and help families navigate things is always free. So there's never a bad time to reach out to us, and there's nothing you can't ask us. We'll do our best to give you an answer or to help you find an answer. Some kind of Beadnell family disclaimers. 2/3 of my adorable children from the biography are home with me today, and they are talkers. So I'm sure we will hear and or see them. And my house is under construction and we're living in it. So things are wild here. So I will ask for your grace, and I'm happy to give some in return. So without further ado, I'm going to pull up a couple of slides. I'm a really visual learner, and it helps me to have them up so that I can kind of stay on track and make sure I'm focusing on what I should be doing. But anytime that people have questions, feel free to put them into the chat, and I'm happy to get to them. But my hope was to talk a little bit about kind of what we do and why you want to maybe reach out to the ARC of Northern Virginia or work with us in the future. A little bit about kind of Medicaid and some Medicaid services, including Medicaid waivers. We talk a lot about supports for people with developmental disabilities and their loved ones across a lifespan. So this is a small amount of what we do, but any question, welcome here or later. So the ARC of Northern Virginia is about to celebrate our 60th anniversary. That happens in March of 2022. So we've been around a good long while. We are one of, more than 600 chapters of the ARC all across the country. And all ARC chapters have the same 2-part mission, which is promoting human and civil rights for folks with disabilities. And the other part of that, kind of really in practice, is making sure that folks have access to inclusive communities and supports in community-based settings. So real employment for real wages in the community where they work, and real opportunities to live in real apartment buildings in the community where they want to live, those kinds of things. We do that a lot through advocacy. So right now, a lot of my work is taken up with our state General Assembly. We're working to make sure laws are passed and budgets are funded that offer new rights, protections, and services and supports to folks with disabilities. And we're always looking for families to advocate with us. That can be done in a lot of ways. If you are just a super busy mom or dad or grandparent and are just doing the best you can, we would love to have you just on our emails, just so you know what's going on. You can read them when you have time and delete when you don't. If you're more interested in advocacy, then I would say reach out to me directly and I'll put you on my little advocacy list where I'll shout out to people and say, hey, is anyone willing to work with me to write a 2-minute virtual testimony and share something? Or is someone willing to respond to an action alert where you just type in your address and click reply? But those are great ways to change things in Virginia and ways to, in just a few minutes, over the course of a year, really, to get involved in advocacy and doing things that can make situations better. Because as we'll talk about today, and as you as parents know firsthand, things aren't always great and things aren't always easy, but there are solutions to those kinds of problems. And those are the sorts of things we're really happy to work on. We also do a lot of education. So things like this webinar would be an example. If you have a school group or a family group or a support group or whatever, where you would ever like us to come and talk, we're certainly happy to do something like that. And we can customize the presentation based upon whatever folks need. We do lots and lots of webinars. And before COVID, I used to say we do lots and lots of webinars that are held in conjunctions with workshops. So you can come live in the room or watch live online. And now, and for the foreseeable future, that's completely virtual. So we're taking the commute and the parking struggles out of meeting with us, and hoping that folks can do it kind of like today at their lunch hour, or watch a recording later at 2 in the morning when you get your free time, right? Whatever that looks like for you. As I mentioned, we do a lot of information and referral. Many thousands of questions come into us over the course of the year, and on all manner of topics. I get everything from new baby and diagnosed to struggling to get nurses in place to have been arrested, and everything in between that you can imagine. So all questions are welcome. We do our very best for the questions that we get the most to have answers for you in 4 ways. One, in like a 1 or 2 page handout, the quickies of what you need to know. If you've got 5 minutes to read about this and make a decision, we want to have that information ready for you in writing. We also try and put all those common questions in the context of a bigger toolkit. So for example, if a parent reached out to me and said, I've got a 6-year-old and we are struggling to get the right speech therapy hours in his IEP. I'll say, like, here's a 2-page handout on some kind of like tips and tricks to pull out at an IEP meeting, maybe someone you can hire to help you, some ideas on learning about that. Here's a whole guidebook if you want to take the deeper dive on all kinds of disability services for school-aged kids, things that happen inside of school and outside of school, and things to think about for the future. And then similarly, I said 4 parts, right? So short written, long written. Then we try and have short video, long video. We have a big series of 3-minute videos that are meant to answer questions like, what is a waiver? What do I do with a new diagnosis? What does the Arc of Northern Virginia do? What do mask mandates mean for people with disabilities? All kinds of things that we try and answer in 3 minutes, because sometimes that's all the time that we have. And then likewise, we try and have a longer version of that. So in the same way I could talk about Medicaid waivers for an hour, there may be an hour and a half version of a webinar that's recorded from those educational workshops that I mentioned, along with a short answer. So we try and recognize that everyone learns and listens in different ways. All of the big guidebooks that we have that cover main support services across a lifespan are available in English, Spanish, Korean, Mandarin, Arabic, Vietnamese, and some in Amharic. We are constantly looking for grant money to translate new things or volunteers to translate new things. We have a great Korean family group that works with us and has translated a lot of our short handouts into Korean too. So we are doing our very best to be accommodating to anybody who needs us. Moving on from kind of those services, and those are the way most people initially come into contact with us. But for individuals with developmental disabilities who do have the waivers we'll talk about today, we have case managers on staff who help them figure out, how can we make this waiver work for you? And where the waiver doesn't, how do we fill in those support needs with other things, with community programming or volunteers or other kinds of ways to get creative and make sure someone has a good life. We operate a public guardianship program, the only one in Northern Virginia. So for folks over 18, if there really is no one to serve as this individual's guardian, or no one appropriate, I should say, but they absolutely need a guardian, we can be the guardian in some cases. We operate a special needs trust that I'll talk about in a little bit, but really all programs that fund long-term services for folks with disabilities, Medicaid, Medicaid waivers, Social Security, housing vouchers, food stamps, all those kinds of things take into account how much money the person with a disability has in the bank, and can make it really difficult to get services if that person has more than $2,000. And so a special needs trust is a way to say, we would like to save money or allow my child to inherit money or allow grandma to cast them on stocks or whatever that is, or allow them to own a home, whatever that looks like. But we don't want to be disqualified from all those benefits. Then we talk about how you can put that money into a special needs trust and have your cake and eat it too, if you will, but be able to do that kind of saving and planning and be able to access public benefits. And then I like to think our hippest sector is our Tech for Independent Living team. And they work on designing apps, like apps on your phone, that help people with disabilities, either in conjunction with staff or in lieu of staff, learn to do a variety of things. So our Travel Mate app is all about traveling around the DC area metro and bus line, how to help people learn to do that with or without support. It can be totally customized. You can have it geolocate and pop up when you get near your bus stop with a picture of what your bus stop looks like and your bus number, right? You can have a video that rewards you when you get on. If you click off, you got on the right bus, right? So that same idea for employment, for daily living skills, we're working on for money management and for safety. And those are funded by grants. So usually folks who reach out and are interested in learning about those can do that for free and get the apps for free. So today I'm going to overview a couple of things, but again, questions are welcome from anybody here. If it's a question that you have about yourself or a question that you all hear often, or a question about something that I'm saying, anything's welcome. So I'll talk kind of a little bit about Medicaid waivers, what they offer, who's eligible, how to apply, and managing being on a waiting list. And as promised, my contact information is at the end. So I use the term Medicaid waiver and waiver interchangeably. Medicaid, just because to get waiver services, you're going to have to go through Medicaid. They're the agency that runs these services and that pays for them. And waiver is not the person with a disability or the family giving something up or waiving anything. It's a strange federal contracting term for how we're able to offer extra supports just to folks with disabilities and not to everybody. We got a special permission. Some requirements were waived to allow us to do that. So waivers are so important because in Virginia, really, they are designed to be the one-stop shop for people with a big range of needs. So if I get a family who says they've got a wee little one and we're not even sure if this little babe is going to need long-term services, but we're seeing some developmental issues now that we want to address with early intervention or medical supports, then I would say look at waivers. And if I've got a family that says I have a teenager with really complex behaviors who's on the autism spectrum, I say look at waivers. And if I've got a parent who's got a 40-year-old who's incredibly independent but needs some drop-in supports, I say look at waivers, right? This is really every age, stage, need level, all kind of falls into the waiver bucket. And once someone receives a waiver, unless they somehow become ineligible, they keep that across their lifespan. So it's incredibly valuable. It really is the only public funding stream, meaning free or very, very low cost, for ongoing services. There are sometimes other funding mechanisms if someone needs, for example, 5 months of job training, right? And then they won't need anything else. Well, I'd say, well, there's other ways to look at that. But if someone's always going to need help on the job, always going to need help with medical care at home, then a waiver is really where we're going to be looking. For our purposes, there are essentially two types of waivers. The first three are developmental disability waivers, and they're chunked there at the top. The names of those three developmental disability waivers, if you're curious, are the community living, family and individual supports, and building independence waiver. But those three waivers share an application, share a waiting list, share an intake process, and share most of their services. So really, until you're actually receiving waiver services and way down in the minutia of it, they're functionally the same. So when we talk about them today, we'll just talk about them as a big bundle, the DD waivers. The other kind of long-term care waiver Virginia offers is called the Commonwealth Coordinated Care, or CCC Plus waiver. And that name is a bit of a misery because the same time they named that waiver the CCC Plus waiver to get in-home services, they took all of our state's Medicaid health insurance and said, we're going to move this over to managed care organizations and call that Commonwealth Coordinated Care. Well, understandably, it's very confusing to have two Medicaid programs, both managed care and waiver, that are called Commonwealth Coordinated Care. So if you have any confusion over which you have or which is which, you are in the majority, and we're happy to help you figure that out and sort that out. That's a really common thing. If you had the ED/CD waiver prior to 2017, this is that waiver. It's supports for people with medical needs. And so we'll do a kind of real quick overview so folks understand the difference between the two. So to work with the DD waiver system, you need a DD or developmental disability diagnosis. DD waivers have a really big menu of services, everything from in-home supports to drop-in supports to complex nursing supports, employment supports, all kinds of life learning skills. They can offer staff awake 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if that's what you needed. They come with a case manager, like I mentioned, we have in our office, who helps you navigate services and meets with you regularly. But the downside is they have a really long waiting list. I'll talk more about the waiting list later, but kind of in keeping in mind here, we would think DD waiver, gonna need it someday, really important, gonna have to wait for it. So those are kind of like the big takeaways. On the CCC plus waiver side, this waiver was designed as a nursing home diversion waiver, mostly for the population that you would expect to see in a nursing home, right? But there's no age minimum. And so sometimes people with disabilities, including very young children, can get this waiver because it requires some kind of disability diagnosis, which could be a developmental disability or could be something else. It's not exclusively mental health. I should be clear on that. It can't only be a mental health need, plus a medical need. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but for medical need, think of more than just a reminder to take your pill in the morning, right? Something that we're actively doing and supporting for this person. It has a shorter menu of services than the DD waiver, limited nursing, limited home care, no employment, no residential support. So maybe fine for kids in a lot of cases, but probably not where we want to be ultimately. No case manager, but also no waiting list. So the reason I talk about both of these waivers is because if the DD waivers had no waiting list at all, that's probably all I'd ever mention. But since they do have a waiting list, and about a third to a quarter at any given time of people who are waiting for a DD waiver also happen to have medical needs that make them eligible for the CCC plus waiver. So we do this little trick where they apply for both, they get on the waiting list for one, and they get services in the other, until such day as their name comes up on the waiting list and they say, goodbye, CCC plus waiver with your limited services. Hello, DD waiver. This is really what I needed. Okay, so how do we know if we're eligible? And for both waivers, we look at three things: your diagnosis, your support needs, and your finances. So for the DD waivers, this is a really long slide because whenever I say they use the federal definition of developmental disability, someone says, what is that? So it's here on the slide if you would like to read it. But if your child has a developmental disability diagnosis. If they're under age 9, it doesn't even have to be a really clear diagnosis, just a sense that we're seeing some kind of significant delays that are going to need some long-term supports. But autism, any kind of chromosomal abnormality or irregularity, Down syndrome, Fragile X, cerebral palsy, in some cases MS, if it's early onset, child onset brain injuries, big host of diagnoses here. I mean, thousands. There are people who use the DD waiver who are one of only a handful of people in the world who have their diagnosis, right? So there's not a list of diagnoses, it's some kind of developmental disability diagnosis. And with everything I talk about, I'll kind of compare our two waivers. So for the CCC plus waiver, like I talked about, it's some kind of disability. So there you may be submitting your documentation from early intervention or child find, a psychological assessment, those kinds of things. And then medical needs. Right here in the middle of this slide that I'm happy to share with Julie to pass around or keep on hand is a link to a self-assessment that's free and online. And it's done by an organization that works in the waiver system, but is not a state agency. I say that to say, I think it's a great tool. It's nothing official. But when families say medical need, I don't know, I'm kind of in the gray area here, I'm not sure if we would qualify, I would say fill out that survey. It'll take you as a parent 3 minutes. It's check the box, yes, no kind of thing. And do we think we're eligible based upon this? It'll give you a really good sense of things. So that survey is going to ask questions about hands-on help with bathing, dressing, using the restroom, plus medical care supports. And that is, I usually think of that as anything a parent wouldn't know how to do on their own unless they were trained by a medical professional. A parent wouldn't know how to do seizure monitoring or use a vagus nerve stimulator without a nurse or a doctor training them, right? A parent wouldn't know how to do G-tube feeding without someone training them. A parent wouldn't know how to do range of motion exercises without someone training them. So if it's the parent who got trained who's offering those medical supports, or you've got a lot of therapies and doctors and medical professionals in your child's life who are providing those supports, that's fine. It's not really a matter of who's providing it. The question is, does your child have the kind of supports that mean someone with some special skills and expertise need to be helping them on a regular basis? Okay. And like I said, the questions on that survey kind of walk through that a little bit more than I have here. So, excuse me. So now we'll look at financial eligibility, which is the same for both waivers. And in both cases, the finances of the child, even if that child is an adult, I'm speaking to you as parents, they're always your child, are the only thing that matters. So if we're talking about a brand new baby applying, or a 15-year-old or an 18-year-old or a 50-year-old, it's only the income and assets of the person who's getting the waiver that matter. So there are families in poverty and families that are extraordinarily wealthy who have loved ones with waivers. What the waiver looks at is, does the person with a disability earn under the income cap, which in today's dollars is about $2,400 a month. Children are generally not big income earners, so that's usually not a big hurdle. But the piece that does often matter is that resource limit, like I talked about. Does the person with a disability, only them, have more than $2,000 in their name? Savings account, checking account, stocks or savings bonds left to them, any kind of cash out kind of resources that they have, an inheritance from an uncle, whatever that is. So those are the kinds of things we would say, okay, well, like, good idea to put those in a special needs trust. Like we talked about in the beginning, the ARC of Northern Virginia has one of those, because assets in a special needs trust cannot be counted against you. It's kind of the safe way to keep your money. A special needs trust just says people with disabilities shouldn't have to live in poverty to get services. And we're agreeing only to use the money in this trust for the benefit of the person with a disability. So if they needed a vacation, a care attendant, therapy copays, better housing, the trust could pay for all those kinds of things. The trust cannot pay for a vacation for their boyfriend or Christmas gifts for everyone in the family, right? It's services and supports only to the person with a disability. That's the deal. The money's only spent on the person and will still allow you to be eligible for benefits. Our special needs trust has a website that's at the bottom here, the Arc of Nova Trust. God, I don't know what it says .com. It should be .org. We're a nonprofit. But just this month, we launched this cool feature where on our special needs trust website, you can set up an appointment right online. Instead of calling us or going to a session, you can call us or email us. We have tons and tons of free events just for parents to go to, workshops, webinars, those kinds of things to learn. But right on our special needs trust homepage, you can say, like, I'd like to book an appointment. I'd like to start talking tomorrow about setting up a special needs trust in a one-on-one appointment, and you all are going to tell me what I need to bring, and we're going to get this ball rolling, which is super cool. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about waiver services, just for folks to have a flavor of it. These slides are too big and complicated for you to feel like you have to know it all, but I kind of want people to have a little bit of sense of why I'm talking to you about these waivers. So across the top here, you can see the community living, family supports waiver, and the building independence waiver. Those are our 3 DD waivers. And for comparison, on the far right side, the CCC plus waiver. So here, when we look at residential services, you can see our 3 DD waivers offer some flavor of residential services, up to always awake staff, always awake multiple staff, drop-in staff. You live with a roommate, you live with friends, you live by yourself, you live with some strangers. All kinds of combinations work. And in comparison, the CCC plus waiver has no residential options. For employment, similar. All of the DD waivers offer a big range of employment services. You want to volunteer some, you need hand-over-hand support. You want to go out and work more independently and just have us drop in or train you for a job. You want to talk about doing all of those on different days of the week. That's cool. You can do all that with the DD waiver. For the CCC plus waiver, nothing. So when I talk about CCC plus waiver is a great lifeline, especially for kids, I usually mean it's a really good service and support if you just need some Medicaid health insurance and some in-home care. But as those children with disabilities turn to adults, and age out of school at age 22 or graduate earlier, there's nothing there to help them with employment and other kinds of services unless they've got a DD waiver in hand. So it's really important to get on that waiting list and make sure that you're in the queue for that waiver. All right, now we'll talk about some in-home services, and we can see our CCC Plus waiver finally gets on the map here. Everybody with a waiver gets several hundred hours a year of respite care, in addition to whatever ongoing care they have. So I would say it's really common for parents with young kids to set up a plan of supports where they'll have 8 hours of care, or 10 or 12 or 16 over the weekend, where someone comes and does activities with their child or helps them just around the house, right, with bathing and dressing and getting through the day, and maybe a couple of hours after school each day. And then there are respite hours. So for those days, like today, for example, when there's suddenly a snow day, there's a way to pay for those extra hours and say, usually I don't need any care on Thursdays, but this week is an unusual one. My child's not in school. It's spring break. It's a snow day. It's a whatever. We've got some extra hours we can pull from and pay somebody to come in. And you can either have an agency do that, and they would send the staff that gets hired, or the parents can choose. You know, they can say, we're going to hire an older sibling or a neighbor or a grandparent or a family friend, or we don't know who we're going to hire, but we want control over who that's going to be. And we're going to post the ad, and Medicaid will pay that person directly. So those are both options. All of the waivers offer up to $5,000 a year to modify a home. Widening doorways, Hoyer lift tracks in the ceiling, keypad codes. So someone who has a tendency to elope and run out can't do that very quickly or at all without the code, those kinds of things. Other services that the waiver offer are up to $5,000 a year on assistive technology. Really common for like iPads and communication or learning software are probably the thing that I see asked above all else, but really any technology that's portable. Waivers can offer crisis supports and some other kind of nuanced services. All right, someone asked about having a copy of the slides. Yes, of course. I'll send a copy of the slides to Julie, and you are welcome, to, like I said, to keep them, to share them, to whatever you would like. And then nursing. So waivers offer private duty or skilled nursing. You can't have them both, but you can have one or the other. So either an LPN or RN level of support for people who have real complex needs and need a nurse to be the only caregiver. That can happen. If you had complex medical needs, but those could be overseen intermittently, for example, being checked on a couple of times a week by a really highly skilled nurse, but the rest of your care could be trained by someone who is maybe a nurse assistant, that can be done too. So big kind of range of services under waivers, so worth having for sure. So if this sounds worthwhile to you, then I would say time to look at the application process, and it's two separate things to think about. Am I eligible for the DD waiver? Did that resonate with us? That makes sense to me. Then I'm going to call my local community services board, or CSB, and all throughout Northern Virginia, it's done by locality. Alexandria City CSB, Fairfax CSB, Arlington CSB, Loudoun, Prince William, same thing. So you're just calling and you're saying, hey, I heard about these DD waivers. Can we sit down and talk about that? And they'll say, okay. They'll send you out a big packet of information in the mail. It's things that any parent, especially of a kid with a disability, could complete with both hands tied behind their back, right? It's basic information. You're sending back assessments, those kinds of paperwork that you've got binders full of. Then they'll meet with you and do what's called the VIDES assessment. And there's a link to the VIDES on our website, but the VIDES will do things like say, how much help do you need with this thing? Taking a shower, getting dressed, taking care of your medical needs, etc. And how often do you need it? I would say anytime someone in life offers to let you see the test before you take the test, you should go ahead and see that test. So I would say, please go to our website, and on our resource library, there's a whole section on waivers, and all the VIDES are there, just so you know exactly what they're going to ask you. I think it's helpful as a parent to know those questions, just so you're kind of mentally prepared. You've got some examples kind of at the tip of your fingers or at the edge of your brain right there if they're ready to ask about those kinds of things. Very painless interview process. And then they'll send you a letter saying, hey, you're on the waiting list. If you think you may also be eligible for the CCC Plus waiver, on the very same day, you can call and apply for that. And that's done through your local Department of Social Services, or in Fairfax, it's called the Department of Family Services. Their numbers here. And same kind of idea. You'll call and say, hey, I heard about the, in this case, CCC Plus waiver. and think we might be eligible. And there, instead of starting with a packet of information that comes in the mail, they'll right there on the phone call, they'll say, okay, I'm going to ask you some questions about medical needs and hands-on care, bathing, dressing, restroom kind of stuff. If that phone screening goes well, they send out a nurse who would meet the person with the disability and their family and ask really the same questions in person. Hands-on care needs, medical needs. If they say, sure, sounds like you're eligible here, then they'll start enrolling you in Medicaid, which has the benefits of being both Medicaid health insurance and paying for your waiver services. And you can start services right away. And I'm doing my little air bunny quotes here, meaning like in bureaucratic government benefits right away terms, a couple of months. There's no waiting list, but it's, oh, I submitted this, did it get processed? I'm checking back in, I'm lining things up, those kinds of things. So if you hear like, oh goodness, either we need the DD waiver or that's the only one we're eligible for, what does it mean to be on the waiting list? Let's talk about that. So like I said, there are 3 DD waivers and you're not saying, oh, I'm waiting for this one. You're saying, I'm waiting for one of them. Same eligibility process. Waiting time is really unpredictable. It's based upon urgency of need. So for example, sometimes I have parents call me saying, we're in our 90s. We heard about this waiver. This wasn't around when our child was growing up. We think we really need help. Well, probably they're going to be near the top of the waiting list, right? We've got a situation where parents are unlikely to be able to provide a full spectrum of care, especially not for much longer. If we have children that are relatively young, healthy, stable, doing pretty well at home with private insurance plus school services plus anything else mom and dad have been able to pull out of the sky, then probably they'll be pretty low on the waiting list. And everyone else is somewhere in between, right? And the Community Services Board manages that waiting list. So I feel like it's important to tell families, if you're on this waiting list, your job is to be your child's best advocate. They'll meet with you, they'll put you on that waiting list, and they'll probably call you once a year to say, hey, you still want to be on the waiting list? Any updates for us? But unless you're reaching out to say, hey, this year we got a new diagnosis. Hey, we're having trouble meeting this need. Hey, this therapy doesn't seem to be working as well as it was before. Hey, one of us lost our job. Hey, one of us got a mental health diagnosis or diabetes, and it's making us harder for us to care for our child with a disability, or we have multiple kids with disabilities, right? All those complicating factors in life, that's what you need to be sharing with them on a regular basis. Those are the kinds of things that move someone up the waiting list and get them considered for what's called a waiver slot, getting a waiver. Just to ease anyone's fears, there are emergency waivers if there's a true emergency. I mean, both parents sucked up in an alien spaceship kind of emergency, like really, truly, there is no one there immediately. We absolutely have to have help, and that person's going to get a waiver immediately. But for most people, there's a wait. Or if adult or child protective services is significantly involved, sometimes the person can get a waiver right away. If you're on the waiting list, that you are somewhere between priority 1, things are a little bit on fire, we really, really need help, to priority 2, which is we mostly have the lids on our pots and we're trying to keep things together, to priority 3, which is, man, it would be cool to have that waiver, but we're okay. Sometimes people who otherwise would have much higher needs or be higher on the priority wait list move down because they get a CCC plus waiver that can cover a lot of those needs that otherwise weren't being met. Okay, here's my contact information. The fastest way to reach me, especially now that we're never in our offices, is the arcofnova.org/answers. And there's a little form that says like, who are you and why are you reaching out to us? And just a couple of questions, and all of those go to me. I think I'm the only person who's answered that form in very, very many years. So you'll get me. You can reference this presentation or PSV or anything that you want, or nothing at all, and just tell me what your questions are. And I'm so happy to help you answer them and figure them out if they're about waivers or education or other kinds of things. And if it's an area where we have expertise, I'm happy to go back and forth with you. I have some families who ask me questions like many times a month or a week, or we go through cycles of crisis where they've got a lot going on and they're asking us a ton. And then sometimes I have people who reply to emails that I sent them 5 or more years ago and say, hey, are you still there? We really got underwater, but we're finally picking back up this waiver plan. Are waivers still around? Should we still apply? Sure. you get in touch with me, you take things on your own time. But whatever you need, we are there to help you navigate it. And all of that, like I said, is for free. All of our workshops and resources and things are for free. Information should be for free. And we like to think that we're there for the ungoogleable. So those things that as a parent, we would just never expect you to be able to figure out on your own, like weird state regulations and programs and those kinds of things. We're so happy to help you with. And if we don't have the answer, we're usually pretty good at finding the right place or agency to send you to someone who does have the answer. So I'll look and see. So there was definitely a question there about the slides, which I'm happy to share. Oh, the number 4, the Prince William County Community Services Board, 703-792-7500, I think. I will look it up right now, and that way it will be on our recording. So the ARC of Northern Virginia's footprint technically doesn't cover Prince William County, so sometimes I don't put it on there. Yes, 703-792-7800, 7800 for the Prince William County Community Services Board. And just like all the others, you're calling to say, I heard about DD waivers, we'd be interested in applying. I don't know, and this is something, Julie, that we didn't talk about ahead of time, but sometimes we have families who don't have legal status here, so they are not eligible for Medicaid. If that happens, please still call your community services board. They can't give you a waiver because it has to go through Medicaid, and Medicaid requires a social security number and some other things. But sometimes they can say, we can still be your case manager, or we have some local tax dollars we can use to fund some respite services for you, or like we can still do some things, especially in Arlington, Alexandria, and Fairfax, to some degree Loudoun and Prince William. But Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax in a big way can even pay for someone who needs, for example, long-term residential or employment services if there's no way they're ever going to be eligible for a waiver, but they really need those. So don't ever hesitate to ask. The Community Services Board really is meant to be the hub for all intakes for developmental disability services and inquiries wherever you live. So reach out to them and lean heavily on them. That's what they're there to do.
That's so helpful because we're seeing a lot of the immigrants, even the Afghani population.
Yeah, sure.
That were down at Quantico. We're seeing a lot actually in our community in Fairfax and ARC, and we're looking for charity groups, money for wheelchairs, you name it, just different resources for them since they're not eligible for insurance yet.
Just super duper hard. So I will say the Independent Center of Northern Virginia, and I'm enunciating like that because it's spelled like the end of dependence. And I'll put a link to them in the chat. ECNV.org is their website. They have a durable medical equipment donation program. So if you have a medical bed or services or things that your kid has outgrown that you would like to donate, that's a great place to give them. Tax write-off, right? Great things, helping the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a loved one who needs something, that's a great place to go and ask. And as is the nature of donations, maybe you ask today and they don't have something, and maybe they have something in another week or a month. They're a great place to be in touch with. And then Nova Housing and Support Services, and their website is NOVA HSS for Northern Virginia Housing Support Services.org, has a great website about, it's aimed at housing for people with disabilities, but on there's a big housing resources directory that's things like food banks and ways to get discount clothing and all those other kinds of things that you need in addition to housing that are open to everybody regardless of status. I mean, usually you don't even have to identify yourself to get those kinds of services. So those are all really good options for people. Always folks are welcome to ask me. For folks who are not native English speakers or are not comfortable in English, always, especially with a government agency, they have interpreter lines on speed dial.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's a really unusual language or dialect, it's a great idea to tell them like long ahead of time so that they can get like a tag along interpreter or whatever it is, for example. But if it's Arabic, like that's not anything super unusual. They've got those folks who they can call anytime. So please advocate for yourself. Make sure you say, I need that person to be on this phone call or in this meeting, or whatever works for you, right? Like I need the information in writing so I have time to read it, because I can read okay in English if I have enough time to work through it or some tricky words. Ask for whatever it is that you need, but document translation and live interpretation absolutely is your right as you are applying for public services. It's not always the case when you're doing private services, right? So a food bank run out of a church, for example, doesn't have those same kind of obligations to provide interpreters. But when you're looking at things like public benefits and the community services board, absolutely, language accessibility should be there.
Lucy, I have another question. I'm trying to kind of learn more. So we see a lot of patients that have Medicaid, but I believe it's the HMO Medicaid, like Anthem Health Keepers Plus. And then so that's one set of populations. Sometimes it's United Healthcare, but it's definitely Virginia Medicaid, and it's more of a HMO. Then we have another population who has a primary insurance with secondary Medicaid. So my question is, do I assume that since they have Medicaid, they've signed up for waivers, or just having Medicaid, they're not, right? So then
That's
I
a great
need to
question.
advocate this waiver, because I think the families that we're seeing a lot with the HMO strict Medicaid, HMO Medicaid, you know, they do get a case manager when you have HMO Medicaid. I recommend them contacting them, staying involved there. They do get that $5,000 kind of pot of money that we recommend to talk about, and we write letters of medical necessity depending on what they need that money for to prove that. But I don't know if that general population is educated on waivers, but they should have but they should be if we see that, we should say, have you talked to so-and-so to sign up for these waivers? Have you talked to this? Like, we need to advocate that more. I feel like I'm not doing the best job. I need to advocate that, but they already have Medicaid.
I was going to see if I had a dry erase board over here. No. All right. We're going to do it on paper, old school. So the thing that drives me nuts about the way Virginia Medicaid did things is in the same year, 2017, they moved all of Medicaid healthcare over to these now 5 different managed care organizations. And you're right, like United,
Anthem Health Keepers,
Aetna, Anthem, Magellan just got renamed to something that I'm forgetting. Virginia Premier. And there's one associated with UVA that I often forget the name of. At any rate, so they called all of this moving to managed care organizations, meaning if you want something from Medicaid, you want us to pay for your doctor's visit, your child's well visit, your prescriptions. They said, we're moving it all over to these organizations. So instead of going to Medicaid to ask, we're hiring a middleman. They're going to pay for that. They're going to do all of that. And they called this, all of these managed care organizations, we're calling CCC Plus. Also that same year, we're saying, oh, do you have a disability and you need long-term care waiver services? We're going to call that waiver CCC Plus Waiver. So same year to rename 2 programs of the same thing. And they said flippantly on this webinar, like, oh, isn't that so silly? And I was like, no, it's terrible. Terrible thing to do to you. It's confusing. So I say that to say, sometimes if someone says, I have CCC Plus, they don't know. Do they have CCC Plus managed care? Just meaning all I have is Medicaid health insurance. One of these organizations is my middleman that pays for it. Or do I have CCC Plus waiver? Do I have that ability to have someone come into my home and do one-to-one care? Do people meet with me regularly to plan services and talk about what I need and those kinds of things? Very different. And so, yes, absolutely. The nice thing is if someone has Medicaid already, either as a primary or secondary insurance, it doesn't matter. The process of them getting a CCC Plus waiver, if they're eligible, is really fast. I know I mentioned it has no waiting list and it's bureaucratic immediately. Part of that several waiting months period between when you're approved and when you actually get services, for a lot of people, is applying for Medicaid, getting all that paperwork done and whatnot so that Medicaid can start paying for your waiver. But if the family already has Medicaid in place, they can really start getting services much faster. There's no waiting list, and they've cut out a lot of that lead time that they would need. But getting families to understand the difference can admittedly be tricky. It's hard for professionals to understand the difference, and we get paid to do this all day. So I usually try and say things like, has anyone ever talked about having a one-to-one caregiver come to meet with you? Do you have someone in your life that's either a caregiving agency or someone called a service facilitator, not medical side, but hands-on care side. And if not, then it's a good idea to look at this waiver. Just call the Department of Social Services or Family Services, depending upon where you live, and ask them, can I apply for this waiver? It's a phone screening. It should be pretty fast and painless, and they're not going to ask for really complicated paperwork or a bunch of meetings or anything.
That's so helpful. Thank you so much, Lucy, for that. And then what about the family that I see that the child just has a recent diagnosis, like you said, that long term, we know there's going to be some challenges. We're not exactly sure how much those challenges are going to be and how much it's going to affect their overall lifespan. However, they have primary care insurance. They could be a firefighter, police officer, whatever, make a pretty good salary. However, we know those expenses are adding up, and their primary care is only covering like 20% of the DME, the durable medical equipment services. So now they have a $5,000 wheelchair they're paying for because their primary doesn't have much coverage. So does it make sense to that family say, have you looked into try and get secondary Medicaid?
Yeah, and the way you can do that, if family income is above the Medicaid threshold, which is pretty easy to Google, right? When Medicaid expansion got passed in Virginia, so it's 130% of the poverty level. So if you are not a family that, and you usually have a sense of, are we getting free and reduced lunch is a good marker, right? Are we eligible for those kinds of services? And if not, then Medicaid waiver is going to be your only path to getting Medicaid for that child, because Medicaid waiver, I'm sorry, it's so loud here, gets you around the whole family income. If I walk in to the Department of Social Services and say, I would like to apply for Medicaid for my kids, they would say, great, we're going to need all of your income and your husband's income and any income and assets your kids have. And that's how we determine if you all as a family can get Medicaid health insurance. If you're applying because you get a waiver, the only thing they care about is the child's income and the child's assets. And so for that family, like we talked about, new diagnosis, complicated needs, I would say, like, see if you can get that CCC plus waiver. If that child has some medical needs, are we having to put in place a lot of therapies? Do we have medical equipment needs? Can you get that CCC plus waiver? Because if you do, Medicaid comes with it, and we'll start picking up those copays and paying for therapies and sometimes things that private insurance won't ever pay for. Medicaid.
So that's how they do it. That's because I see some families and I'm like, how do they have secondary Medicaid? Yeah. Like I know they're very, great families, but I'm like, how do they have access to that? So you can start with the CC plus waiver. Explain your story to them, do the phone interview, do the phone triage thing, and then they will help see if you will be able to get qualified for Medicaid for that child. If you have money in that child, do the trust, do whatever you said, and then that child could have Medicaid.
Right. And then, so for example, if you just went in as a parent, like I said, my example of going in and applying to Medicaid, then all of my kids would get Medicaid because the whole family's eligible. If you apply just because you get a waiver, they don't talk about your other kids. They don't care about your kids. Yeah, they're only looking at the child with the waiver. It's even different workers who process the applications than people who look at regular Medicaid applications. There's a whole special set of rules if you're getting Medicaid because of waiver and flexibility.
This is just for the patient, not for the family. Okay. Exactly. Thank you for explaining that. That's so helpful.
Sure. It is really strange and confusing. So it's not unusual. I mean, sometimes parents say, like, frankly, I don't really want someone in and out of my home. We're managing the day-to-day caregiving okay. But then would it be helpful to have therapy, co-pays, and whatever? And so I do strategize. And I say, like, okay, well, the way to get that Medicaid is through the CCC plus waiver. And if you don't want a bunch of people in and out of your house or to deal with it, do you have a neighbor or a grandparent who's willing to come over one Sunday morning a month and bill Medicaid for 4 hours in home care? Like, just enough to keep that waiver active. And then you get all the benefits of the Medicaid too. So those, again, like, reach out to us with any questions, but those are the kinds of things we help people solve. Like, this is what I need. This is what I do or don't want along with it. How can we get there from here? For anyone who's curious, also, if you have Medicaid as a secondary or some cases tertiary insurance, for the person with a disability, two things to know. One, Medicaid is always the payer of last resort. Medicaid will never pay first or second if you have another insurance. They always have to be billed last. Sometimes folks ask about that. So you can absolutely have multiple insurances. If the child has Medicaid because of a waiver, but they also have insurance through their parent's employer, if that parent's employer's plan meets a bunch of criteria, like it's not a high deductible plan, and so it's like a couple of other things, Medicaid will pay the amount that adult has to pay to their employer each month to keep their child on primary insurance. So what do I mean by that? Like, let's say for that adult to get insurance for themselves with their employer, it's $100 a month. And for that adult plus their wife, it's $200. And for that adult plus their wife and their kid, it's $300, right? So we can see adding that kid is $100 a month. If that child also has Medicaid, the parent can apply to a program called HIP, the Health Insurance Premium Program in Virginia, and say, hey, wouldn't you like it if I keep this employer plan for the bargain price of $100 a month to keep my kid on this plan? Medicaid, you get to be the payer of last resort. Not everything gets billed to you. Everything first gets billed to another insurance. And it's a big cost saver for Medicaid when someone has another insurance, because Medicaid always pays last. And it's a big cost saver for the family, because the premium to keep the child on the parent's employer plan is totally paid for by Medicaid if that plan qualifies. And that's something that not a lot of folks know about or remember to use. So just a good little tidbit.
Okay, there's a question in the chat. Are parents still allowed to be the person paid? I know they allowed that during COVID.
Again, I'm so sorry about the construction. They're supposed to be on lunch break. So yes, historically speaking, pre-2019, if you were a parent of a child under 18, you could never be their paid caregiver. Virginia had a rule against that. They said, like, no matter how complex your child's needs are, if you've got a 17-year-old for whom no one else would have to hire a babysitter, but you need someone who's a nurse, like, too darn bad, parent, you have to handle all of that on your own. Because of the pandemic, they changed that. We asked for special flexibility from the federal government, saying, in some cases, we can't find anybody else. And in some cases, we aren't safe to let anybody else in the house. So we've got to allow parents to be paid caregivers for minors. Well, what do you know? This was a huge boon to families, right? And a cost saver to Medicaid, because it meant instead of having families lose their house because one parent had to quit their job, or they had to go on food stamps as a whole family because they had to reduce family income trying to manage this child's care, the family stayed stable. And parents were happier and kids were happier in some cases. This doesn't work for everybody, right? So we found this worked really well. So right now, today's January of 2022, we are working with patrons in our state House and Senate, putting in bills to make this flexibility permanent, to say, even after the pandemic's done, we want to still be able to do this. So right now, parents can be paid caregivers of minors because those pandemic flexibilities are still going on and will be for at least, I'll say 8 more months, I think is the current deadline. That could be extended. If this bill passes, and I think there's a very solid chance of that, and contact me if you want to advocate for it, then that would always be the case. And so that's what we're hoping for. If it doesn't happen this year, we're bringing the bill back next year. This is too important to families for it to not ultimately pass. But I'm really hopeful about 2022, which would mean it would be effective as of July 1, 2022. So there would never be a gap. The current flexibilities would overlap with the new law change. Fingers crossed.
Lucy, this has been so helpful. Thank you so very much. Does anyone have any other last questions or comments? But we really, really appreciate this. I'm so glad we're starting this relationship and friendship with you. I know a lot of our patients are going to benefit this. So I really appreciate your time for us today. So thank you so much. Thank you so very much.
Pleasure. Please, anybody be in touch anytime. Whatever we can do for you all is our pleasure. Have a great one.
Thank you. Bye, Lucy. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone, for signing in today.